Hello everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my camera here. Hello, hello. Okay, perfect. Yes, perfect. Perfect. Jan said first, I want to thank you all for joining this event tonight and taking your time to provide ICE resources and deaf mental health resources and support. Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Jeanne. This is my sign name, and I work in astrology. I'm going to pass it off to whoever wants to go next. I think we're going to have Riss. Yes, hello. My name is Riss. This is my sign name. I use they, them pronouns. I'm deafblind and I'm from Minnesota. Yes, hello. I'm Sharon. I'm from Maryland. And I'm the co founder and clinical director of Deaf Counseling Center. Yes, hello. My name is Diego. I live here in Minnesota. Thank you for being here, Diego. David saying, yes, good evening. My name is David. This is my sign name. And I live in Minnesota. And I'm here to represent signs of sweet food. And Luba saying, yes, hello, my name is Luba. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I'm a therapist. Yes, hello, my name is Bree. I live in Minnesota, and I'm also with Signs with Sweet Food with David. Perfect. And Carrie says, yes, hello, my name is Carrie. This is my sign name, and I'm from Florida, and I'm a deaf interpreter, and I'm also an advocate. Perfect, said Jeanne. And we have Al here, Al Jimenez, and he's going to be interpreting. If you could introduce yourself. Yes, hello, my name is Al Jimenez, and I just graduated from Gallaudet, their master's program, and now I work at Austin Community College. And I'm a tutor there, and now I'm going to translate into LSM. And we also have an interpreter here with spoken language English who's going to be speaking and going to be switching with our other interpreter. And we also have an immigration lawyer on the call who's going to be joining soon. Perfect. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and start. The first thing that I want to start with is ask everyone, and you can go ahead and raise your hand if you want to answer. And I'll give you the name of who's going to answer so you know how we're going to proceed and what it's going to look like. So, what approach with ICE and what actions have you been taking in regards to ICE? And who wants to answer first? Diego, do you want to go ahead? Diego said, well, it really depends on the person. We have many different identities. Some people feel, anxious, and that's a valid feeling because of the color of their skin, because of their accent, because of their ability to express English, or a variety of other reasons. But for me personally, I would stay calm. That's the most important thing is just to stay calm and not try to mess up the process. Videotape if I can, if I'm able to. and we can post it to the website where we report ICE to let people know that ICE is happening and inform our state attorney general that they have set up a website specifically for people to be able to report what we're seeing. And so that's what I encourage people to do and discuss with their family as well beforehand. Anything that's happening, discuss what could happen and what's the plan? How are you ready? If ICE does come, what are you going to do? And I've had that discussion with my family. And I would encourage people, if they feel like they could be targeted or could be involved, to also discuss with their family. Beautiful, says Jeanne. And Riz? Yeah, I want to add to what Diego had said. It's really important that before everything happens, before you go out, for example, download an app. It's called Ready Now. And that's something you can use to make a plan. And it's important to discuss with your family, with a trusted friend, and go ahead and fill out that app. Yeah, I'll add that to our doc. Yeah, so if you feel, like you might be someone who would be targeted, you can press a button for 3 seconds and it'll send out all of your information and it will remove that information from your phone. Yes, there are some challenges, for example, in the wintertime with gloves, so try to be thinking and figuring out strategies for yourself and how you can feel comfortable to be able to respond quickly if you need to. And I also feel that it's important to stay home if you're feeling scared, to stay calm, rather. Interpreter error. Stay calm is important. Whatever you do, make sure you stay calm. Okay, said Jeanne. Thank you. I have another question. I'm wondering, what do you do if ICE threatens another person? Or maybe you witness something? Should you go ahead and get involved? Or should you just stand back and maybe record it? What should you do? What would you recommend? What would you do if you witnessed something? David? And David says, in Minnesota, our governor has said that we can go ahead and record and document what's happening and then report it, make a legal complaint if we need to. And Bree said, I want to interrupt something with the live stream. They're saying we can only see a few people. They can't see everyone right now. And Jeanne says, oh, okay. I thought they could see all, says Carrie. Luba says, oh, an iPhone, maybe a laptop is different. I don't know. Jeanne says, hold on, let me try. Hold on just a second. Let me go and check. I'm going to go look and see what's going on, specifically on Instagram. Okay, Jeanne says, yes, I just looked into it and no, it looks pretty good. All people are able to be seen on Instagram. And, some couldn't find the Facebook link. It's under my Facebook name. It's under Jeanne Marrero on Facebook. And that's where you can see it on Facebook Live. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the point. What do you do if something happens to someone else? Should you get involved or should you just stand back and film it? What should you do? And Diego said in Minnesota specifically, we've been sharing a lot of information on how to support each other and figuring out how to protect our communities. And when we decide to film, what we decide to film. Is it a protest or anybody resisting, for example? And, then we might have to be careful to focus on that specific activity. But we can't put other people in risk. Maybe I finished filming and maybe they can see my face, for example. They can see my information. And then if I decide, for example, that I want to pick up food or I want to, go to families' homes or something like that, ICE will have seen me. They'll be wondering where I'm going. They'll be figuring out which house. I may not feel safe. They might be nosy. And they do track people. ICE does track people doing specific activities. And then if, you go back and forth, that can cause, a break in confidentiality. So I do encourage people to think about what their best skill is. Is filming their best skill? Great. But make sure that you're focused on the point of action, on what's happening. Not be doing more than one thing because you may be putting immigrant and the immigrant community at risk. Perfect, says Jeanne. Riss, did you have something that you wanted to mention? And Riss said, yes. I also want to add, specifically from Minnesota, and in all the areas as well. I'm sure that what your responsibility is within your group. Maybe there's one group that's, specifically focusing on protesting or on filming, that and giving real-time updates about what's happening. And then maybe you have another person, who's bringing food, for example, or doing transportation to and from school or to work. And then maybe you have another group that's focusing on donations and vlogs and things like that. Make sure that you're dividing responsibilities because you can't have one person be doing it all. That can put people at risk. Perfect, says Jeanne. And now I do have one more question before I go over to discuss more mental health. I feel that it's, really important for the deaf community with all of us being deaf. Maybe we can hear a little bit, maybe we're deaf blind, specifically around driving. If ICE stops you in front of you and you refuse, what do you do? Do you have to obey what they're saying? Do you have to get out of your car? Or what do you do? What action can you take? Or, do you stay in your car as a deaf person, as a deaf blind person? What do you do? And Riz? Riz says, yes, this is Riz talking. Specifically within the deaf blind community, we've been talking about, feeling very trapped. We try to use different car services, for example, for transportation. But if something happens with that driver and that driver gets pulled over, what do we do if they get taken? We can't drive. We're stuck. We're stuck in the car. So what do we do? If we're in the middle of the highway, for example, in the middle of the city, if we're really far away from the community, what do we do? And so we've been thinking about how do we support each other? What do we do? And Diego says, yes, those of us who can drive or who are involved in, transportation, I highly encourage you to look at ACLU, Know Your Rights. They have 4 videos that are very simple. One of them is, let me see, what's the name here? Oh, I'm trying to remember what all the names are. It's really important to be able to know your rights and watch those 4 videos. If it could tell you about what you need to do before you go. Providing an interpreter, that's a whole other issue. And that's something we can discuss of, how do we request an interpreter if they're not listening to us, for example. But it's important to stay calm and use a card, to be able to give. Yes, the 4 Know Your Rights videos and having a Know Your Rights card. There's different kinds of resources. There's cards, there's different kinds of communication devices. It depends on the person, really. Thank you. Carrie, go ahead. Yeah, related to what Diego was just commenting. Those 4 questions. Are those readily available? Well, they should be on the document that we're sharing, right? And be able to find those and print those cards and make that available? Yes, yes, says Jeanne. Yes, to be able to give out to people. Yes, perfect. Perfect. Let's see. Does anybody else want to add anything? Ask Jeanne before we go into another question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and ask Luba here. I'm curious. Anchoring. How do we do? How does that work? How do we do that? Hold on, hold on. Allison, can you finger spell that for me again? Anchoring. And what is that, asked Al? What's that? Yes. Can you give me an example, asked Al? And Luba says, like a boat has an anchor at the bottom. Oh, okay, okay, says Al. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. And so they're asking, about an anchor. Al is now interpreting into LSM. And she answers, yes, that's a therapy term, right? Yes. Okay, if you could go ahead, Luba. And Luba says, I know that this is a lot of terminology, but I want to bring up anchoring in particular. It's a way to balance. It's a way to keep care of yourself. Keeping your sleep routine, for example. But when that anchor is taken away, our body really breaks down. Our nervous system, we're not able to predict as much, and we just have a breakdown. And anchoring is not something that you can do by yourself. You need a co-anchor, someone who you feel safe with, that you trust. Maybe it's a community, for example. Our bodies really need to be with community to be able to process. And so a co-anchoring is really important, to be able to help process what you're witnessing. And Jeanne says, yes, I have to admit, that there's a lot of serious pain that's happening, serious injury, many incidents that have been very sensitive. And so what do we do? If you don't know what to do, if you don't know what mutual injury is, how do you navigate that? There is a word for it. And I want to make sure that the deaf community knows that we have a word for mutual injury, mutual pain. What do? We do anchoring, which means that someone else, someone is there for you, somebody that you trust. And Luba, you wanted to add something? Luba says, yeah, I'm going to expand a little bit about mutual injury. What does that mean? And let me explain. The most simple way possible is it if someone really believes, someone that you really value, breaks that validation and long term something happens, it doesn't matter who it is, but if it's happened for a long time, this is not the first time, this is not something new that's been happening within the community. And Jeanne said, I've never forget my first happened at Pulse, the nightclub in Orlando, in Florida. And the shooting occurred for people who were gay or queer. And that was just heartbreaking for me. I couldn't talk, I couldn't function for a few weeks. It was just a total shock for me. And I didn't know there was a word for that. That was my first experience with that kind of situation. And Sharon, did you want to add something? Perfect. Yes. I want to add interpreter error, moral injury. It could happen from the government or the system, something that we trust, that we can't trust anymore, that they've betrayed us. It's a very deep injury. People feel very shocked. What do we do next? How do we go from here? I've been seeing a lot of people just feeling very stressed, exhausted, worn out, worried, scared, all sorts of different emotions. And sometimes that can lead people to feel frozen. And it's all right to follow the news, to read through things, to keep up, to be involved in protests, for example, supporting. But it's also all right to do the opposite, to have a timeout, to take care of yourself. It's really important to renew your nervous system, to have that time to be calm. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't help. And some people, feel like they're lazy if they aren't being involved. No, it doesn't mean they don't care. It means that they need a time out to take care of themselves so that they can come back with full energy and be able to help. Riz? Yes, honestly, with this, for the longest time, when all of this started happening, this situation started coming up here, I noticed a real increase in stress in myself in trying to figure out everything, trying to do self-care at the same time so that I can still advocate for others. And that's a real challenge. I couldn't eat. I really struggled taking care of myself because of what I was prioritizing. I was prioritizing my community, specifically deafblind people who are isolated, who don't have information, who don't have access to social media or may not know what's going on. And for me, that was very conflicting. And that's still where I am right now. Okay, said Jeanne. And so now we're going to go on to another question. If ICE were to communicate with the deaf community or try to force you to communicate, can we say no? We need an interpreter? Or do you have to listen and write back and forth? Do you have to write and say, okay, I'm going to follow them, or no? Are you going to resist? What should you do? What do you recommend to do? And Carrie has her hand up, and she says, well, the most important thing is just to remain silent. To wait for an interpreter and remain silent, not giving a bunch of information. You're chatting with a lawyer, having them explain what to do next. With police, with ICE, they can't ask you questions without having someone with you to support you. Risk? Also make sure that you have your card. Whatever it is, to be able to show somebody that you're deaf, that you need an interpreter, that you need a lawyer. Because you can't be writing back and forth or signing at them. That's not functional. ICE will not, communicate. They won't try to communicate with you. And Al says, hold on, hold on, hold on. So for example, he's still interpreting into LSM. Perfect, said Jeanne. Thank you. Thank you. So we have Selena, who's the interpreter here, and she's been pretty involved with immigration. And I don't know when she's going to be able to put on her camera. Okay, Selena's stuck waiting for the other interpreter. Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Waiting for that. Okay, no problem. That's fine. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to another question. Thank you. Okay, so now what do you do? What is your message that you think all deaf people should know? What is a specific message around ICE and what to do specifically? What is a message that you would like to share? Something that you wish they knew. And Carrie says, I think the number one thing is to be prepared. If you're not prepared and you're just shocked by all of the thing, you're going to feel stressed. You're not going to have time to really think through and plan. And so, it's really important to look at the different resources, find what you need, and prepare. Make sure that things are available to the community. Our community has not had access maybe to reading and writing, and that's fine. Having somebody sign and explain it. Do you need support? What do you need? Perfect. Thank you, says Jeanne. Yes, thank you. Does anybody else want to add something? Okay. I'm going to go ahead to the next question, said Jeanne. What do you recommend in terms of daily self-care? What kind of self-care do you think is important to do? What do you recommend, after seeing all these terrible things that are happening? What do you recommend that people do? Sharon, do you want to go ahead? And Sharon says, I always go back to the basics. Make sure that you're eating, that you're sleeping, that you're drinking water, that you're moving your body. And when you're really stressed, and things are just really coming at you all at once, it can impact your body. Your vasovagal nerve can be impacted. It can impact your heart, it can impact everything. And so if you don't take care of the basics, if you're not moving, if you're not taking care of yourself, that can make your stress worse. It's pretty easy to forget it, pretty easy to ignore it, when you're trying to do other things, but it is very important. And Jeanne said, yes, I want to add, that we also need to discuss about this more than just one time. We don't need to act like nothing happened. No, it's better to have a discussion, an open communication with family or with friends within your personal space. Talking is healthy for me personally. And Diego, did you want to add something? And Diego said, yes, thank you. I do want to add that, I do feel that there are other factors to this experience, specifically in Minnesota. I still have a job I have to do. 40 hours a week, I have my work, right? But then I have all this other situation that's happening, with doing video calls to try to figure out what's going on. It seems like half the country, it seems like nothing's really happening for them. Oh, how are you doing? I'm doing well. What are you doing on the weekend? Do you want to get together to chat, to go out, that kind of thing? And it's like, no, we're not okay. I'm explaining to people, we are not okay. We are not okay here. And that takes a lot of energy to try to inform people of what's going on here. It's not okay. It's not, just your regular protest. This is a blowout. This is a serious situation where everyone is feeling very oppressed. It's very oppressive. I agree, said Jeanne. I noticed, Luba, you had raised your hand. Yes, I wanted to talk about self-care specifically. And I think, talking is part of self-care. You might be able to figure out that somebody had a similar experience. You might be able to connect with them. Anchoring, for example, you can't do that, without having somebody you feel safe with, somebody in the community that you can process through. It's impossible, if you're getting up every day to go to work and then you're taking care of your family when you come home and, all the sorts of things that you're doing, it's a lot. And so co-anchoring is really important to be able to share with someone, even if it's something simple, just sitting side by side, reading a book, for example, that kind of thing can help. Doing laundry together, doing a grocery run together, something that you can have where you're not feeling as overwhelmed by things. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really think that that's really important. There's so many immigrants, indigenous people, Latinos, English isn't their first language. So How can we communicate? How can we, what's the best resource for them who have a hard time accessing ASL or sign? What is a resource that we have? And Diego is saying, from my experience, when I meet somebody, needs support with language, for example, in their native sign, I typically talk to my deaf interpreter group and see, who has within their network, make sure they have that connection with that right person. Often we may not think of that, but there's a lot of creative solutions. For me personally, I depend a lot on my network. And Vriss is saying, yes, I say that I feel the same way as Diego. From my observation and my experience, it depends on the community and the individual. They each have their own preferred support, their own preferred mediation. Do you mind? And then we bring someone in to help with that communication. And, we have different sign languages happening, different communication that's happening, facilitated communication. And yes, that does require a lot of time to make sure that everyone is understanding what's happening, to make sure that we're navigating and that we're all on the same page, explaining the situation of what happened. So there is a lot of networking, a lot of volunteer work, a lot of supporting. But at the same time, sometimes it can be a challenge to find someone who's available.
Selena, I'm here. Jeanne is saying, yes, thank you. I think that's really important too. What you're talking about, joining that we have a lot of people here that are doing different things. We've got different interpreters going on. People are coming here from different countries. We've got all sorts of things. And let me expand that a little bit more. Go ahead. Name sign C. Must be Selena. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Selena. And this is my sign name. And I work with an organization called Hands United. So we work together with deaf immigrants. We do a lot of support work. And hang on a minute, looks like we need to do a time. We're taking a time out, I think, for an interpreter. Okay, we have Al plugging in the computer. So didn't want the battery to die. All right, Selena says, okay, we're good to go. All right, so Hands United, we work with deaf immigrants. We support people who have been detained, who have not been detained. Maybe they need help finding an attorney. Maybe they need help finding an interpreter in their specific sign language. Maybe they need help figuring out their path forward, what they're going to be do, the best way to navigate the situation that they're in. So we here at Hands United, we have a website, we have resources, and we have the Know Your Rights cards. So we have those in 17 different languages, actually. So now we're in the process of adding more languages. Soon we're going to go from 17 to 20. So we have communication boards for people if they're working with ICE, even picture boards. We do what we can to enhance that communication. We've got other picture boards with like different flags. Maybe you don't even know the name of the country. Like, we can say, hey, we can show you a picture board, and you go, yes, this is the country I'm from. This is my flag. So then we know that way we can look for an interpreter in their particular signed language. We here at Hands United, every Thursday, we have a Know Your Rights presentation. We do that in ASL, and that's free. Anyone can join. I'll upload that information. I'll make sure that you have our website. We are also on Facebook. We have the website and the Facebook. And Jeanne is saying, in the document that I've recently sent, what the resource options, you are listed on there. And we're going to make sure that that's always included and you're going to have that link. So please, I would like to include that. That way everyone can have it. I'm going to, when I update my information, I'll make sure you're on there too. And I like to continue to add links as we get more information. So Selena really does have some great support services. And I want to thank you very much. Thanks for being a part of this. So now what we're going to do, we're going to be having, it'll be David and someone else sharing. We're going to be talking about food. Maybe why don't you explain your experience with the programs that you offer, what you're providing, what your services are? Why don't you let all of us know? And David's saying hello. Thank you for the opportunity. So, what we're doing here in Minneapolis and in the Twin City area, wow, there's a lot going on. We're inspired, but at the same time, we're a little bit heartbroken. We're holding both of those things equally. This has been really rough. Um, we've had that shut. We've had, I've received a lot of emails. Some people, um, some people are have been places have closed. Some people are feeling a lot of stress. They don't feel safe. They don't feel protected. We have customers or clients or who, maybe the restaurants, they feel like they can't successfully go to work and safely go to work. So at the same time, on the flip side of that, we're seeing, restaurants have becoming a mutual aid support. Sometimes these restaurants are saying, okay, we'll become a place of resource for food for people. We're going to be helping people get what they need. So, schools here, the School for the Deaf, they have been hosting mini events. They're doing some charity events. They're doing things for food. They're helping people with helping kids with their homework. They're helping people get clothes. They're helping people with transportation. So we have a lot of things happening here. And Bree is saying, yes, we have a lot of connections for resources. And we have a document of resources as well. So what we're doing is we're applying that to everyone in the area and not only Minnesota. I mean, these are things that can be used elsewhere. So if you can, if people have things like resources or they know restaurants that are willing to help or, people that are going to assist, maybe food banks. We're trying to, sometimes people are gathering food for donations for people. We find people that can deliver the food if people don't feel safe to leave their apartment or their home. We've got people that will also do that. So what we're doing is compiling the list of resources in the city area for all different avenues of ways for people to help all sorts of different roles. And Jeanne is saying, okay, so what has your experience looked like? Alice saying, hang on just a minute, let me catch up. Great, perfect. Okay, so now what's your experience been with those of you in Minnesota? What you're seeing, what's happening. Would you mind sharing your real, true lived experiences about what you're seeing? It seems so shocking. Maybe you can explain in a little more detail and expand the on the ground situation. Yes, David. And David is saying, wow, it's just been like, it's surreal. It's wild. Um, like for example, I went over to one of my favorite businesses. Yes, and outside there was a sign on there that said, no ice. You can't come in. No ice. People are literally posting the signs. And there's many businesses, more and more, are saying the same thing. No ice. Ice is not welcome here. It's strange to see that. That's kind of wild. And then at the same time, it's really inspiring to see people showing up and they're videoing, they're documenting, they're marching, they're helping each other, they're talking to each other, they're forming a network. And Gina's saying, wow, that's really something. That's really raw. That's really something. So yes, Diego. And Diego's like, I would like to explain. It's just not normal. It's just not the way it usually is. Like every time you see, someone strange driving, or maybe someone has like an out-of-state license plate or something, we look twice. We do a double take. And that's been new. We haven't done that before. We're like, oh, looking at the cars, checking everything out. We're very hyper vigilant about what's happening. At the same time, we're, like checking out, it's always sort of like who's at my door? What's going on? Because, in my area, we have a few ice raids. We've already experienced that. So, and like 1 mile from us. So it's not even like it's that far away. It's right here in our neighborhood. So, and a place that I used to shop at that Target, I used to go there. So, when we leave the house, we like make sure that we have certain things that we didn't really worry about before. Like, what if something happens? It's stressful. It's stressful just to leave the house, which should be simple, but it's not. But we're worrying about things, like, are we going to be blocked? Is our car going to be blocked? I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. So we're not sure what's going to happen. So we're on extra alert. So we don't want to be lax with anything. And, we don't want to get someone just trying to eat or something. We've seen things happen where someone all of a sudden has to pull out a film. Like that guy we saw with Alex. He just pulls out his camera and he starts videotaping, and look what happens. He got killed. So really, we're very hyper vigilant. We're constantly checking, we're constantly on edge every day, all day. So that's just kind of the experience that I'm having. And Jean saying, yes, people are trying to provide, thank you for providing and giving us some explanations about what's going on. And I'm curious too about, it sounds like it's such an exhausting experience. And so, yes, go ahead, Luba. So it's been tough. There's been no way that we can just, magically do all of this self-care and take care of things. At least when I'm thinking, I was like, we're just trying to coexist. We're supporting each other. We're helping each other. We're trying to, do the community support. We're trying to advocate. So, I mean, the whole state's under stress. I'm telling you, everyone's on edge. We never really know when it's going to accelerate past what really is tolerable, but it's everybody. So we need to stay together. We help each other, supporting each other with the basics like food and drink and community and collective support. That's really what our go-to has been. And yes, what would you like to add? And and also I think it's the deaf counseling is also, I think it's really important that people need to stay safe. That's one of the most important things. We don't feel safe, and you can't feel alone. Community counteracts that. So it's a way that we can share many different, ways among us. Um, it's we all have different backgrounds, we have different roles, and maybe we can find ways to share together and create the network so that we are more collective and can tolerate this situation better. And then Riss is saying, yes, I would like to add to the experience my home area right here. Because I live outside of the Twin Cities. I'm not quite in the middle of it. I'm a little bit south of the Twin Cities. And so there's so many apartments. And the apartments, there seems to be a lot of ice going in. There's a lot of activity there. And sometimes they're not being allowed to be in. So sometimes when there's two different, that maybe there's an apartment over here that they can't access. But maybe the apartment over here is more public and they can access that more. So I'm seeing it's almost like a difference between the access that they have. I mean, some have signs saying, no, no, no ice, you can't come in. But other ones, if they're just like a public place or, public, or they don't have that no ice sign, then that's a situation where they are more like, I live in a public apartment. So yeah, they're a lot quicker to come in, knocking on doors, going door to door, making their contacts. It's pretty scary because they leave their thing. People are shutting their blinds, they're shutting their windows, they're shutting their lights off, they're literally hiding in your own home. And so we don't want them to know that we're home. So many apartments like have just closed up. They don't feel like they have the ability to even stay open. It's just dark. It's almost like a ghost town or something here. It's strange. We see way less activity. It's not at all the same as it was before when people would hang out and socialize and do different things and go coffee and go shopping. That has way reduced. It's really just like a completely different energy, just a different vibe in the whole energy here. And we are switching interpreters.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, says Jeanne. I did want to give Luba a space to go ahead and speak. Yeah, I'm going to keep it simple. Developing a safety plan. Exchange notes. If somebody is gone and you have a note on the door, share a timeline of where you're going to be at, when you're going to be at. Develop strategies with locations, home location within your family, within your friends, where you can follow your location. You know, with the phone, there's GPS, but it at least lessens. It makes it lessen the amount of worry that you have. Risk and risk commenting. I don't recommend notes on the door. I don't. Why? Because eyes can see that and then go tell people where someone is. And that's why we've been spreading out the Ready Now app. And planning communication with family, trusting friends, sharing that information, and making a plan. So what do you do if, a person doesn't have a phone, for example, or you don't have access in person? You meet with a person, you chat with them, you explain, you know, you have something ready. Okay, says Jeanne. Carrie says, yes, I want to add one thing that I've been seeing happening with cars, with somebody being taken maybe at night, having pets in the car, having children in the car. So, I really encourage you to check on your neighbors. Make sure if they're friends, neighbors, just make sure everyone's okay. Make sure that they're able to, have taken care of their pet maybe or taken care of, just be open. Make sure that you're looking around, that you're being aware of what's happening around you. And Shannon, yes, I think it's important to remember there are many things that people can do to help. You don't have to show up at protests. You don't have to drive people. You can help in different ways. For example, I helped somebody move into a new home. I gave my furniture. I donated some furniture. It's very important also to call your senator or your representative. You might think it's no big thing, but it's very important. Everyone should be calling. It makes a big difference. There's a lot more of us than there are of ice. A lot more of us. And Jeanne saying, Carrie says, yes, I want to add one more thing. Vote. We've got an election coming soon. You make sure that you're going to vote. You know, if the Democrats are able to overtake the Republicans, that could make a difference. Perfect, says Jeanne. Thank you. Thank you. And I have a question specifically for Riz with deaf-blind resources. Now, what do you have? Where can the deaf-blind community find resources? How can they be in contact? What do you recommend? What do you share? Riz said, yes, that has been a challenge. The best way, honestly, to provide resources specifically to the deaf-blind community is by direct communication, texting directly, informing someone, social media, those sorts of things. People are lost. They don't generally have the ability to access that information. And so the best way is direct communication with resources. People say, "Oh, I don't understand what this is." Direct to where, says Jeanne? Direct text. Direct text, says Riz. Or, if you know where they live, make a plan to go visit their home, meet with them, explain what's going on. Either of those are the best way, honestly, with the deafblind community. Or also, some deafblind people do have like an email list group, for example, and so you can ask, can you join that to be able to share information, to be able to share resources, for example? I would say those three are really your best options. And, I have noticed often a lot of the resources and the information, they don't really pay attention to the deafblind community. It's a very forgotten community. They forget that we're here. They're so accustomed to being able to share information so fast, but the deafblind community is so far behind. And so really try to think of other people. Don't just think of deaf-blind, deaf plus, deaf disabled, all the different categories of people that exist. Okay, so Well, I think we've got a lawyer here, and I'm wondering if you would mind. Hold on. And Selena said, yes, we're going to be wrapping up. Jan saying, yes, we're going to be wrapping up soon. Okay, all right. Okay, I see. Yep, just making sure, if there's anything else to add, but no, looks like, we've been going with good information so far. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Jan said. So now I've got one more. Let's see here. And Diego saying, sorry, I would like to add one more thought. I've noticed before, there was a high number of ice, that there were more trainings, for example. What the training looked like, I don't know, honestly. But that has mostly finished. During the summer when the budget cut happened with Congress, we're not able to have that sort of training in person anymore. And so, when we're asking about rights, about interpreters, people don't know what they're talking about. There hasn't been training within the ICE community for them to know what's needing to happen. And so it's hard to say, but there is no way to prepare for that sort of experience. But it is important to really push, contact Congress, contact Senate, stop funding. For example, Friday, there's going to be a vote to increase the budget, like Shannon said, and understand that this is completely different than what we've been used to in the past. And so I'm concerned, a lot of people are involved with the disability. Okay, thank you, said Jeanne. And Jennifer, our lawyer that's on the call, just said that she does have some resources for the immigrant, for specifically immigration law, and is doing a series of community webinars and is happy to share that information with Selena, the interpreter. And we'll be sure to add that to our doc once we have that information. And I'll be sure to add those links. Okay, now, whew, time's going by. Okay, question and answer, open question and answer. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my phone here at the question and answers and see, if people have questions and see if we can answer them. And Gianna is saying, huh, oof, my phone is, does anybody else have their phone with them? Can take a look at Instagram and see, or Facebook and see if we have any questions. Diego said, yeah, I can take a look. Yeah, my phone is, just not working here. And Carrie's saying, no, I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any. Hold on just a second here, said Jeanne. Perfect. Carrie said Instagram. I see a question on Instagram. Let's see. I'm in Instagram here, says Jeanne. No, I don't see any questions. Carrie said, Yeah, no, I see one. I see a question. Let's see here. People who are being taken, will they have access to their family? And Diego's raising his hand. And Diego said, in 90% of the cases, no. And from the other stories, that I have directly from people who have been taken and released, yes, they are separated from their family when they're put into camps or different areas. And so, having your family is very hard. It can make it harder because of the system. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of things that are happening all at once. And so it can be impossible. There's about 12 hours to 24 hours between when someone was apprehended and when they were on a plane to Texas. And in that amount of time, the family just didn't have time to really get those sort of information out before the flight occurred. And Carrie's raising her hand. Carrie said, "Yes, I want to add. The lawyer just shared in the chat a few links about how to find a loved one after they've been arrested. And so we'll be sure to share that and put that on our resource list so people can click on that and learn more about what they need to do." Perfect. Okay. And where can we find resources, for example, that resource list? So on my Instagram post, you'll see all of our pictures. And if you comment the word resource, it'll automatically send you the link. And that link is going to stay the same. We're not going to be changing it, putting out a new link. That is the one that will always be updated with new information. And you can also follow my Instagram, for example, and be able to see updates there. Okay, I see another question here. Do you have a list or could you make one for interpreters to sign up to provide pro bono connections, meetings? Yes. Yes, I have connection with an interpreter agency. And yes, you could contact me. Let's see, who else has a contact here? Diego says, I would encourage you to look at Hands United, and they have those sorts of resources. And I also recently believe RID did announce wanting to be involved in supporting. And so I encourage you to contact both of them. They have great resources and are great to connect with. And Al said, hold on just a second. Hold on a second here. And Selena, her organization, Hands United, has. And Al is continuing to interpret into LSM, and we're going to be switching voice interpreters here.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay. Oh yes, Carrie, go ahead. And I wanted to add too that I work as a deaf interpreter and with an interpreting agency as well. So we've got a network of interpreters, and I will be thinking about how we could, get a list going of volunteer interpreters, maybe in different states. And then there's a way we can look that out. I'm going to figure something out. I'll work with you on that. Yes, and if we can get them all into like one place, that would be great to get one documentation. And then also the people that can do Spanish as well. And LSM would be ideal. Okay, so now let me see. I have another question here. Hang on just a second. Okay, perfect. All right. So I have a list, yes. So Hand United says that they have a trilingual list of interpreters and with different languages, different sign languages as well. They have that resource. So that's great. Great. And I'll see in just a second. Let me catch up. Perfect. Okay. So would you like to add anything before we close the meeting? I want to have some space for some last minute conversations with the therapists. So do we have mental health resources? Maybe we could add that to the list as well. Could we create a list of that? And let me think about that. Yeah, I could add that. Yeah, there's some, the Deaf Therapist Center probably has some ways that we can make some connections. We can get some links on there. We can get the list of the links on that doc as well, therapy related. And I also would like to put out there too that I think it's great because we do have that Center for the Deaf, and they have a lot of resources. And so that's a wonderful community. They do a lot of care there with what they have. So we could add that well as well to the document. Jean says, I think I already have the NDC on there. And also too, we could host the Care in Action. There's wellness activities that we have regularly, and we bring people in. So we could add that as well. That would be great. We could get all that compiled into one place. That sounds great. And then, yes, Diego. And I have one last comment. I mean, we're going through a lot here, obviously, but I want people out there also to know that we are so happy to share the resources, the things that we've learned, what we've done as we've been going through this. Like if people need some more, I don't know, like, as we have more people joining us and we get strengthened, and then we have more to give. Like we're learning a lot. So connecting with us, if you're motivated, come on, send what you need because I'm happy to share the resources we have. People don't need to reinvent the wheel. Yes, go ahead, Riz. And I thought about saying too that, if there's more deaf-blind resources, maybe we could add that. Please let us know. We're always looking for deaf-blind resources, always looking for ways to advocate for them. Sometimes they need interpreters at their home if they need something tactile or, someone that can support them in different areas. So please definitely share that. If you come across anything deaf-blind, I'd love to know about that. Okay. So, hello there. Hi. Glad you were able to jump on. Hi, Kevin. Hello. So, would you like to introduce yourself? Sure. My name is Kevin Maritza, and I am from Mount Emery in Mexico. I'm in Monterey. I'm from Monterey, from originally in Mexico. Yes. Oh, great. Glad that you could be here. I'm glad you're coming in. So, would you like to provide some sort of information or resources for the deaf community? What would you like to add, Kevin? Well, right now I'm just watching all of you. I'm looking at the meeting and about the deaf education and the experiences. We really don't have a lot of things set up. We don't have the same kind of system that you do. I'm just trying to experience and learn what you've got going on and pick up some of the stuff you have up and going so that we can do that, and maybe we can take some of the stuff that you're learning about and setting up in the States, we can bring it to Mexico. So deaf schools have been closed. And so I'm watching and learning and gathering resources for myself. And Jean says, yes, we do. We have quite a few resources that we're compiling. We're making a list. We're adding more. And Kevin says, yes, we don't have much compiled yet. So that would be great. I'm here to learn. Jean is saying, is anyone else interested in adding something before we close the meeting? Okay, so I guess we're moving towards the end now, and I wanted to tell you that this chat space has been recorded. So it's going to be loaded up to YouTube. And so you can come back, you can review it, you can look at it at any time, you can come back again and again. We're going to go ahead and post the link and we will advertise it and you'll be able to find it on YouTube. from here forward. And I really want to thank all of you for your time, for the interpreting, for the voicing, for the helpers, for the therapists, for all of the people, even by name, Diego, Reese, all of you, Carrie, David, thanks so much for your time. We're trying our best to provide resources and things. This is the first time that we're doing this, but this will not be the last. I'm hoping that we can do this again moving forward periodically and collaborate and pool our resources together. Everyone's thanking Jeanne. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your effort in doing this. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye. Have a good night.